Imu is the secret immortal ruler of the entire world and the single most mysterious character in all of One Piece. But while the info we have about Imu right now is limited, in this video I will talk about 4 key pieces of information that Oda already revealed, and that spoiled the truth about Imu even before it's all confirmed officially. Now you're gonna think that point number 4 is crazy at first, but trust me, once you hear it, you're going to think it was obvious. So let's get into it. Jumping right into point number 1, Immortality. Or Imu-sama, is almost certainly an immortal being who has been ruling the world from the shadows for over 800 years, ever since the Void Century. In fact, he is speculated to be one of the 20 original founders of the world government, Saint Imu of the Nerona family. Ivankov believes that the current Imu and the ancient Imu are the same person, and that this person's life was likely extended using the Ope Ope no Mi and its perennial youth operation. If this theory turns out to be correct, then the current ruler of the world, Imu-sama, personally witnessed and shaped the events of the Void Century. He must have seen the ancient kingdom with his own eyes. He must have known Joy Boy and the other important figures from the past personally. And so, uncovering the truth about Imu is crucial for solving the mysteries of the ancient kingdom, the Void Century, the One Piece treasure, and of course, the Declan. Speaking of the Declan, this brings me to the second key piece of information. The fact that 800 years ago, Imu was betrayed by Lily Nefertari, the ancient ruler of Alabasta. And Imu knew that he was betrayed the moment he learned that Lily's full name was actually Lily D. Nefertari. Even though the former queen of Alabasta, Nefertari Lily, was supposed to have left Marijua and returned to Alabasta, she never actually made it back. She completely disappeared from history, and her place as ruler of Alabasta was taken over by her younger brother. So the Nefertari family did continue to rule the country, but not through Lily. Lily vanished, as if she had been deliberately erased from history. When Cobra asks the 5 elders what happened to Lily, they simply say that they don't know. According to the records, Lily did not agree to become a celestial dragon, and she did not pledge her sword to the empty throne. That is why there are only 19 swords around the throne itself, instead of 20. But the specifics have been lost to time, and so the Gorosei simply assumed that Lily went home. Cobra then follows up by asking, what is the D? All 5 elders are shocked by this question, and they ask why Cobra would ask such a thing. Cobra reveals that even though Lily never came back to Alabasta, she did leave a brief 800-year-old letter behind. This letter has been passed on from ruler to ruler within the Nefertari family from the time of the Void Century. And that is the moment in which Imu decides to publicly reveal himself to Cobra, which shocks the Gorosei. Imu-sama speaks the word Lily, then walks up to the empty throne and sits on top of it. Imu says, D is the moniker of our ancient enemy. In recent times, it cropped up more frequently. However, it is nothing but a faint echo. Those who carry the name do not even know its true meaning. This confirms that the D-clan are enemies of the gods, in other words, the enemies of the world nobles, which is something that we've heard before. And we know that modern D-clan members like Luffy don't really know what the D actually represents, so Imu is right on that point. But even though Imu tries to downplay the significance of this initial, it is clear that the D is troubling to him. I guess you can say that Imu can't handle the D. Now do me a big favor and leave a like on this video to make up for all the people who are going to leave a dislike after that terrible joke. Anyway, Imu says that all of this is Lily's fault. Without Lily's blunder, pirates would not be chasing the poneglyphs, and those vexing relics would never have been scattered all over the world. It seems that Lily Nefertari made some kind of mistakes that allowed the release of the poneglyphs, and so instead of them being hidden away under strict government control, they were released into the world where they could be read, and then the information could be used to harm the world government. Imu always suspected that maybe Lily didn't just make a terrible mistake. Maybe she allowed the poneglyph to escape world government control on purpose, because she was actually a traitor. After all, the information on these poneglyphs represents a huge danger to the world government, so releasing them into the world on purpose means that you want to bring the world government down. It seems that Lily tried to play it off as some sort of mistake or accident, but Imu isn't buying it. And in order to confirm his suspicions, he demands to know what was in Lily's letter. How did Lily sign the letter? Was it simply as Queen Lily of the House Nefertari, or was there something else in her name? Cobra, who is already aware at this point that he is basically a dead man, decides to just tell the truth. The letter written by Alabasta's ancient ruler was signed by Queen Nefertari D. Lily. As we later learn, Lily's letter said, "The poneglyphs must be protected. Fly the flag that heralds the world's eventual dawn." But as soon as Imu heard the initial D, the time for talking immediately ended, and a sharp arrow-shaped tail rushed towards Cobra and pierced through him. The tail and Imu's transformation into a dark giant monster is directly related to his incredible devil fruit power, and that is the key piece of information number 3, Imu's devil fruit. The big reveal of Imu's powers came in chapter 1085, and in many ways his devil fruit appeared to be the dark counterpart of Luffy's Nika fruit. Just like Nika, Imu's devil fruit seems to give its user the ability to instantly turn into a giant cartoonish creature, a creature that can perform such ridiculous feats as creating a giant mouth and swallowing Sabo's flame without taking any damage. Imu also appears to control a long black arrow that can be used to attack and pierce his opponents from a distance. And this arrow could actually be an arrow-shaped tail, like the ones that devils often have in cartoons, and especially in those old rubber hose cartoons that Nika's own powers are based on. But although both devil fruits seem to allow its user to transform in cartoonish ways and do ridiculous things that shouldn't even be possible outside of cartoons, these two devil fruits are not the same. Instead, these powers could be seen as the perfect counterparts to each other. Luffy's awakening turns his hair and much of his clothing white. He becomes a creature known as the Sun God, and he is said to bring freedom and joy to everyone around him. On the other hand, Imu is known for being dressed in all black, and his devil fruit power turns him into a dark monster. While Joy Boy is a warrior of liberation who brings laughter and joy, and who promises to reveal the truth about the world and to liberate everyone from oppression, Imu oppresses the world from the shadows, hides the truth in darkness, erases history, and uses fear and violence to force everyone to conform to his rule. Imu is essentially the dark counterpart of Luffy, and his devil fruit is like the anti-Nika. One thing that occurred to me, and that was also mentioned by other YouTubers like Arthur from the Library of Ohara, was the possibility that if Nika has the power to turn imagination into reality and essentially make dreams come true, then maybe Imu's anti-Nika power is to bring someone's worst fears and nightmares into reality. Now that would be an incredible OP devil fruit power that is absolutely perfect for a villain. The fourth and final key point about Imu comes when we finally have Emu speak for the first time in chapter 1085. Now, unfortunately, I don't speak Japanese, and the intricacies of Emu's speech patterns can only be fully understood by someone who does speak Japanese. Thankfully, the One Piece community has the legendary Arthur from the Library of Ohara, and he was able to fill us in on all the specifics of Emu's speech. Link to Arthur's video is in the description, by the way. If One Piece content interests you at all, you should definitely be subscribed to Arthur. Now, the first piece of information is that Emu doesn't really speak in a highly distinguished and refined way. Instead, the ruler of the entire world speaks rather casually. He does use some very old and outdated words and expressions, but that makes sense if we assume that Imu is really an immortal being who has been around for like 800 years. But here's the more interesting thing. Imu speaks about himself in the third person in a pretty childish way, and Arthur describes it as almost coming off like a kid trying to sound edgy and cool. Imu is also prone to temper tantrums, and he instantly attacks King Cobra as soon as he hears that Lily had the initial D, even though he may have been able to get more information out of Cobra if he had been more patient. Now, of course, we know that Imu isn't a literal child because he's an 800-year-old immortal being, but he might have become immortal while he was still a child, making him something like an eternal child with special powers, a magical boy who wouldn't grow up. Wait, doesn't that sound kind of familiar? Okay, before you call me insane and dislike the video, give me just a few minutes to convince you that the character of Imu was actually inspired by none other than Peter Pan. When I say Peter Pan, you're probably thinking of the Disney version of the character, but the original Peter Pan from the novel was actually a lot darker. And the draft versions of the original story that were uncovered after the author's death were even darker still. In fact, at one point, Peter Pan was apparently going to be the main villain of the story. Besides the fact that both Pan and Imu may be eternal children who never grew up, and besides the fact that Imu and Pan both have magical powers, there are other similarities between the two. Imu is famously fond of his secret garden, also known as the Room of Flowers, and of butterflies. These butterflies are often used to symbolize him in the manga and anime. Peter Pan is also associated with wilderness and nature, and he hangs out with fairies like Tinkerbell, fairies who have wings like butterflies. Peter Pan is known for randomly forgetting things, which is associated with his magical immortality and residing in Neverland. The Lost Boys, the group of orphans who live in Neverland and who are led by Pan, eventually forget how they got to Neverland and that there's an outside world in the first place. Emu is not known for losing his own memory, but he is known for trying to erase things from history. So essentially, he's trying to erase the collective memory of humanity. He basically wants humanity to become like the Lost Boys, to forget how the world government even came into being in the first place, and to forget that there was ever a world outside of the world government. After all, if you never even consider an alternative to the current system because you don't know that an alternative ever existed, you are much less likely to rebel against this system. Oh, and do you remember who just happened to be Peter Pan's enemies in the story? You know, the group of people who are waging a constant war against Peter Pan and the Lost Boys? That's right, it's literally pirates. But why would one of the main villains of One Piece be based on a Disney hero like Peter Pan? Well, for a long time, people have speculated that Peter Pan is a lot more sinister than we realize. In fact, he is actually the villain of the story. Even in canon material, it is implied that he kidnaps the Lost Boys after they wander away from their parents in a public park, and then he takes them to Neverland where they forget their past lives and just assume that they are orphans. In the books, he is even implied to kill off the Lost Boys when they get too old. Yes, you heard that right. Unlike Pan, the Lost Boys actually age in Neverland, but the reason why they're all still kids is because Pan kills them when they become too old. Some even believe that Captain Hook and the pirates are actually former Lost Boys who rebelled against Pan and got away before he could kill them, which is why they were able to grow into adults in the first place. So Peter Pan is not actually a friendly kid looking for some friends. Despite acting like an edgy child, he is actually an ancient and sinister being who, like the Pied Piper, abducts children and then murders them when he's done playing with them. Some even believe that Peter Pan was never human at all, and that he is actually a demon who takes on a human form to trick children into following him into Neverland. As I said earlier, in rough drafts of the story, Peter Pan was supposed to be the main villain, and he was apparently referred to as a demon boy by the author himself. And who do we know with demonic powers in One Piece? Saturn, the other Gorosei, and of course, Emu. Peter Pan himself was partially inspired by the Greek god Pan, the god of wilderness, who was known for instilling fear and panic into humans who wander into his domain. In fact, the very word panic comes from Pan, because anyone who entered his neck of the woods would hear his cries and instantly become terrified. Again, this is not too far from Emu, who also loves nature and likes to tend to his garden, and who instills fear into all of humanity through his position as the ruler of the world government. If you're interested in this topic of Peter Pan being a villain, I will link a video down in the description that goes in depth into all the lore. But if Emu really is a dark Peter Pan type character, then what does this mean for our story? For one, it means that Emu's real appearance might be very childlike, which means that he could actually have already shown himself in the story, but we just don't realize it yet. He may have already appeared as some random child that Luffy and the Straw Hats came across in the story, and we would never know it because we wouldn't expect that an innocent looking child was actually the main villain of the story. The idea that Luffy and the Straw Hats may have already met Emu without knowing it is intriguing. But whether or not that actually happened, I think that Emu definitely knew the original Joy Boy personally. Actually, I think Joy Boy may have been a Lost Boy who was at one point allied with Emu, but then decided to turn against him and become a pirate. From the whole story of Lily, we already know that some of Emu's allies ended up betraying him because they found out that his ultimate plan was evil. And these are the people who eventually formed the D-Clan, just like Lily became a part of the D-Clan when she turned against Emu. Interestingly enough, the story of Peter Pan also has a character named Lily. More specifically, her name is Tiger Lily, and in the story she is in love with Pan. So what if during the Void Century, Emu, Joy Boy, and Lily, along with many others, teamed up to overthrow the Lunarians, who at that time lived atop the Red Line and were seen as gods among men. Maybe the 20 Kingdoms and their allies were initially fighting to overthrow an oppressive regime. This would explain why Emu doesn't talk like a royal. He started out as a rebel, a commoner. But then, once the war was won, former allies Imu and Joy Boy came to very different conclusions about what to do next. Joy Boy, Lily, and their allies wanted freedom and equality for all the kingdoms and races. But Imu believed that the only way to preserve peace and order was to establish a new dictatorial regime, the regime that we know today as the world government. Joy Boy, Lily, and the others who disagreed with Imu decided to rebel against him, they became pirates, and they formed the Declan. But Imu was stronger, probably due in part to his overpowered demonic devil fruit. And in the end, Imu and the world government won. If Imu is the Peter Pan in this story, then he would have been the captain, the leader of the Lost Boys. He literally made them who they are. He made Joy Boy, and he was also the one who ultimately destroyed him. But thanks to Lily, the hope of the pirates and the Declan lived on until one day Joy Boy returned in the form of Monkey D. Luffy. So what do you think? Is my theory that Imu's character may be based on an evil version of Peter Pan beginning to sound convincing to you? Let me know down below. If you're looking for another intriguing One Piece video to watch next, check out my video on why I think Luffy's devil fruit has a second awakening. Link on screen and in the description.